The wheel of time turns and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. Welcome to Dragonmount, the Wheel of Time podcast. I'm Kathy Campbell.
I'm Rajiv Moté.
And I'm Maureen Carr. For this episode of the podcast, we are talking about Season 1, Episode 1 of the Amazon Prime Video Wheel of Time show. The title is Leavetaking. This episode was directed by Uta Brieswitz, and it was written by Rafe Judkins.
All right. This is the first episode of the Wheel of Time. I think something we've been waiting for around about 3 decades, maybe?
A very long
A
time.
very long time. Let's take a minute to talk about what Rafe Judkins did to introduce us to this world. A world that some people are encountering for the first time, and a world that some of us longtime readers have been waiting breathlessly to see on screen.
Well, I was actually surprised when I watched that first minute with Moiraine getting ready and the story that she was telling, how emotional it made me. It felt so right. And that feeling of correctness kind of went through the entire episode. And what a whirlwind of an episode. Just like any, first episode of a television show, it's there to set up the story. It's there to set up the characters. It's there to set up the plot. And the plot was very different than I was expecting. This whole search for the dragon was something I was expecting, but more importantly, the laying it out of the 4 Tavern, the 5 possibilities for the dragon, all of this just came pouring out in such a natural way. It just made me so happy, and I was so emotional.
So I second what Kathy says about the introduction with Moiraine, her getting ready. She's very literally getting ready for battle. She's wearing pants instead of a dress. She's got this holster looking thing on, the suspenders. Just everything about her just speaks of the trials that are going to come and that she's prepared for it. And so I really think it started with this sense of urgency, this sense of something's on the horizon that's going to be tumultuous, and she's ready for it.
Yeah, I mean, a first episode is kind of a mission statement, right? And we get a literal mission statement right at the beginning. Moiraine is getting ready. She's gearing up. She needs to search for the Dragon Reborn. Men have screwed up the world. They have misused this power, and in their arrogance, they have damned themselves. And now there's going to be, through the cycle of reincarnation which exists in this world, this figure, the dragon, is going to be reborn into the world. It could be a man, it could be a woman. And it's Moiraine's mission to find that person, because it's only that character who can stand up to the forces of the dark. So we get that mission statement right off the bat, and then the very next scene, we see the stakes of what happens to men who touch the one power right now.
What a great way to show, not tell, what happens with the madness.
Yeah.
It was a perfect way to present that to the audience. The madness, the Red Aja, all of that encompassed in a quick 2-minute scene.
Yeah, it was very fast.
You immediately understand what the stakes are.
Definitely. So the punishment for men's arrogance is that when they touch the one power, they go insane. What we see is the consequences of that insanity. There's a man who's fleeing from Aes Sedai. Two men. But he has his companion who's saying, hey, you can use this power. You don't have to go down this way. And, of course, he's imagining people. It's a sign of the madness. He is painfully dealt with for using the power, but it's considered a mercy by the Aes Sedai.
Yeah, and in this scene, Liandrin Sedai, she's played by Kate Fleetwood. She just nails it. She's just strength and power, and that little bit of arrogance we come to recognize in Red Sisters, just as they take up this mantle of keeping the world safe from men channelers. And I think she's just fantastic.
Yeah, there's no question that she is in charge.
Oh, yeah.
She is not just the leader of, this group that are hunting down the male channeler, but also in charge of the whole situation. She has complete control, and she is going to do whatever it takes to keep the world safe. Mm-hmm. And it really helps show what's going on, what's happening, how this situation is situated, really.
Yeah, and she brings down a mountain to do it.
Yeah, that great use of the one power right away. Spectacular. It's just so physical. We think of
Yes.
the one power as being like elegant and not seen, but the way they decided to show the weaves as like those little threads around them, I think was a great call. It's very physical.
Yeah, there's an effort that's put into it. It's not just a magic wand. That's something that I noticed when you compare this to other magic systems, like in Harry Potter. Some of the bigger fights, yes, there's a little grunt when they're, throwing magic from their wand, but it's very little effort is needed to do things. And even from the very, very beginning, seeing Liandrin, you see the effort and motions that it takes to channel, which really sets up things for the show that we've seen and how physical it is and what requirements are needed to be able to channel in such a beautiful way that you really understand what is required.
When watching some of those channeling scenes, especially during the fights, I kept thinking of Dungeons and Dragons computer games and how casting time matters here.
Yes.
And that's why warders are so important.
Absolutely. And we see a little bit of that at the end of this scene when Moiraine and Lan are watching this happen, and Lan preps Moiraine onto the horse and goes and takes care of himself. And this is already setting up kind of the relationship between a warder and their Aes Sedai and how they are there to support and ask questions and get the vibe and see what needs to be done and do the things that need to be done.
Liandrin's kind of attitude towards the men who can channel. Moiraine starts out by saying the men in the past were arrogant to try to use the power to cage darkness. And Liandrin tells that poor soul who's unnamed that this power is for women. When men touch it, they make it filthy. There's a real disdain or hatred even of men who can channel. And even Moiraine, she looks impassively as this man screams, as Liandrin does whatever she's doing.
Clearly, Moraine's goal is just to find the dragon. She can't concentrate on something, this poor soul, so much as that's not the dragon.
Yeah, her concerns are bigger. She's got a global perspective. And once she rules out this is not the person she's looking for, it's kind of like an afterthought. Because if she doesn't find the dragon, then everybody's going to suffer a similar fate.
Yeah, exactly.
At the end of the scene, though, she does mention rumors of four Tavern. And I'm wondering what rumors might have circulated. Like, what signs are there that we're looking for that reveal these four are Tavern?
Yeah, and maybe people who haven't read the books are wondering what Tavern are.
Yeah, you don't, it's almost a throwaway mention. And you know what? That's okay. In the future, we'll talk about it. It's not really developed at all in the first season, is it?
The first episode?
Or at all in the
no,
first season that we've seen.
Not yet. No, it hasn't been. So
Yeah.
we don't know what Tavern are yet.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
In the first 6
Okay,
episodes.
I'm sorry, maybe I shouldn't have brought that up.
I mean, I think it's a good question, but we can watch and find out.
Yeah.
Let's talk about our first view of Emond's Field.
Oh, gorgeous.
pretty.
Did you recognize it from the books?
I didn't because I don't see things when I read. But as soon as you hear the voiceover of Nynaeve talking about the braid, I'm like, oh, we've made it to the women's circle. We've made it to Edmund's Field. It was just so beautiful, absolutely gorgeous, breathtaking. The scenery and the usage of the scenery in everything that we've seen, just so deliberate and so awe-inspiring.
What the first episode also spends a lot of time doing is, of course, introducing us to our cast of characters. This is an ensemble story, and it establishes a lot of inner conflicts to those characters, things that may be surprising to people who read the books. Moiraine and Lan, I have a question for you. That hot tub scene, are they lovers?
That was my first thought, too. When I saw that, I was like, oh, they are implying a heavy sexual tension here. So I can definitely understand if that's the way a lot of viewers see it.
It's so funny because the implication is that there is a layer of sexual aspect, but it's not overt in any way. There's no lingering glances. Even when Lan enters the hot tub, it's all business, basically. You know, yes, he's naked, but there's casualness to the nakedness. So it's like they've experienced each other, but not in a needy way, if that makes sense.
And it really occurred to me that these are different cultures that are being shown, and they are perhaps co-ed bathing as part of their culture that they come from. We don't know yet what happens with other people taking a bath, but they certainly did look casual, familiar. This was meant to relax.
Especially getting a little extra heat in there.
That was such a nice little intimate moment that I think also spoke to what these characters do for each other.
Yeah, the support for it.
Yeah, but this, going back to that familiarity, I think that also hints at a sexual relationship. Just when you're with your partner for so long, like, you don't have lingering looks. It is sometimes just business. And the fact that that familiarity is there, I think really leans towards a sexual relationship.
The implication is that they've been working together for 20 years.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that nailed down that aspect of it for me was when we get to see them fight together.
So fluid, just like one body.
So fluid, and Moiraine is gathering her flows to fling at her enemies. Lan is clearing the way. He's buying her time to do it, and they're doing it so automatically. It's almost like a dance. These are two people who have fought together for a long time.
Yes, and he knows where her blind spots are. He can be there from behind and be ready to protect her. Even at that big, most epic moment where, you know, she's pulling the building down, the wave of dust comes, him running right at the beginning of the wave, not being able to catch her as she's fallen, but immediately is going over her to protect her from the dust and debris that is coming.
That was such a wonderful scene. They were so in sync, and he is so protective, and they're a well-oiled fighting machine.
Yeah, Lan is just one of my favorites, and I think Daniel Henney just did such a fantastic job of capturing that. And Rajiv, I think you did say a little earlier that there's more personality to Lan than we see in the books, and he's got a little bit more depth to him. I think Daniel Henney just pulls it off amazingly. So with the protectiveness, like you said, asking for heat in the bath, which gives him more layers.
He's able to be vulnerable with Moiraine.
Yes.
Yeah, and when he enters the inn, he's very stoic and has this very solid presence of, I'm here, I'm paving the way, and then lets Moiraine do her thing, but still is making an impression in that really protective manner.
Yeah, well, even just his bearing when he comes in is aggressive almost, because Nynaeve immediately grabs her knife. She would have, I mean, it's Beltane. There's, I'm sure, a lot of people that are going to and from the inn, but immediately she knew he was a threat.
Yes.
With his black hood raised.
Well, and, you know, it is Edmund's Field, so they don't really get visitors very often.
When we first meet Egwene, she's being thrown into a river.
Pushed off a cliff.
I love that so much.
Along with with all of the women in Emond's Field, or almost all of them.
Yeah, it was so great to have Madden. She's talked about, you know, doing her own stunts for this bit. You can tell that it was so real. But also you have the juxtaposition of, here's this sweet, kind, tender moment. Hair is being braided. They're having moments of, you know, oh, welcome to womanhood. And then, oh, by the way, I'm going to throw you into a river. That interaction is just so beautiful to like set up, hey, this is a ceremony that happens in this area. This shows why this braid is important. And, oh, by the way, I'm also going to, you know, throw you off a cliff.
Just the sense of community bonding. You know, Egwene being recognized as a woman, and Nynaeve's speech about you're always alone as a woman, but you're never alone because we've all been through this same thing. It was just powerful.
You both said that it's a symbolic ceremony. What is it symbolic of?
Well, I think it starts off being sweet and kind. like welcome to this sisterhood, this acceptance. But at the same time, it turns into this, you gotta be strong. You've got to be able to kind of go with the flow, be able to bend. And I think that's a major theme in the series as a whole.
And know when to allow the forces of nature to take control. It's definitely a bit of, life happens around you and you can't control everything, but here, like, live with what you can control and see what you can make with it, basically. It feels like something that they have been doing for generations and centuries, and who knows how many turnings of the wheel. But there's also that moment when she does make it back to the inn that her dad was very worried about her. And of course, he doesn't know what the ceremony is. They're very adamant about keeping it private and just for women. And the fact that he was so worried shows that sometimes I bet they don't make it.
They don't learn how to ride those currents. And I think even later we see Egwene has that scar, I'm assuming from the rocks in the river.
Yeah.
Yep.
Definitely. This is not a purely symbolic ritual. This has teeth.
Well, I think in the Two Rivers, they want them to be strong and tough.
They have to be.
Just the harsh winters and being so cut off from everybody else.
Well, it's really interesting how that feeds into how the women of Emmonsfield as a group are portrayed. When she comes back, yes, it's the father who comes in very concerned and fretting. Is it her mother who says, "Nah, you're drinking with us today"?
That was one of the Coplans.
Or maybe is it a friend? Oh, that's a Copland. Okay.
Copland or a Congar, one or the other.
But yeah, I mean, back at the inn, the women are hard drinking, smoking, partying. The men do seem a little bit more reserved, and that seems to be part of the world building.
Well, and even, jumping ahead in one of the scenes with the big Trolloc fight, which was just amazing. But the moment where the townsfolk start attacking, that first initial scream of attack was a woman.
And then, yes, as the women surround a Trolloc with pitchforks and farm implements and just massacre it.
Yeah. No one's more of a fighter than Nynaeve, even though she gets dragged away. Holy cow. She is the embodiment of what a wisdom should be. That moment where Lan comes in, just like you mentioned before, and she grabs the knife and is ready to take this stranger, and leading the women's circle conversation and being able to push Egwene off the cliff. But let's be honest, that probably was a little bit of fun too. But you can tell that she hates the death that happens. She needs to protect her town and the people in it, and will do whatever it takes. And just a beautiful setup for such an incredible character.
She's fiercely loyal, I think. Definitely. And almost to a fault.
Yeah, and that's so well presented in the scene in the cave with Moiraine, when Moraine's coming around and, trying to dig and find out how old Nynaeve is. And she, I'm going to protect my mentor and blame the Aes Sedai, and it's all your fault, and screw you. This is my family, even though I wasn't born here. I'm still a part of this, and, get out of my cave.
Let's talk a little bit more about Egwene. She's initiated into womanhood via the ceremony, and she comes back and she's avoiding her boyfriend, Rand. And later we learn in this episode that she
was invited to get that career as a wisdom and hadn't accepted yet and wasn't sure of what she wanted to do. Nynaeve told her that she thinks she can learn to listen to the wind, what that means for her and her life, and with Rand as well. And that whole dynamic, you can see that she's torn and she isn't sure.
It's an interesting dilemma for her, because apparently a wisdom can't marry. That's interesting that that's a dilemma for Egwene, and I wonder if that will be explained in the show.
Watch and find out.
Watch and find out. There was one scene that I thought, this is why I thought Egwene had already made her mind up from this. It's the scene where she and Rand are together, and he takes the berry out of his pocket. And he tells the story about how he used to bring her baskets of berries, and how he was like a lovesick puppy. And he gives it to her, and it feels like this kind of romantic moment. And she flips it. She says, "How long has that been in your pocket?"
I think part of that, though, is because they know each other so well. She felt that comfortable intimateness, because this was probably not the first time that they've slept together. And by that interaction that they had with the berry, it felt very much like someone that you've known for years and years and years who's trying to make a special moment, and you're like, wait a second, I'm gonna give you grief for this, because did you really have that berry in your pocket the whole time?
It was playful.
Yes. Yeah, very relaxed.
So we've talked about Egwene's dilemma, career or marriage, basically. By the end of this episode, Nynaeve has disappeared, presumed dead. It seems like Egwene's future has been dashed.
I think she's trying to find comfort in him, but since he's been rebuffed, he's unable to return those feelings. I don't think he's able to give her the safe space she's looking for.
And additionally, the changes that become with the world around them, especially at the end, when the Trollocs come and fight and when they have to leave, this whole idea of, I can't be here to be a wisdom, because of course if they didn't leave the town, she could learn to be a wisdom. That career change isn't necessarily a worry so much as the world is so overwhelming. Mm-hmm. So much is changing. So she's trying desperately to find what she can do with her life and what choices she can make. And so by defaulting back to, the friendship that she has with Rand specifically, because of course I'm sure she knows Perrin and she knows Matt, but Rand is that friend that is the most special.
He's a farmer who lives with his father away from the village. He's lived all his life in this district and
has very good sweaters.
Good Two Rivers wool.
I love it.
Are you going to make one of those, Maureen?
I'm going to make everything.
Rand seems to do his most reflective thinking up on mountaintops, and he brings up how he thought that he was thinking about the woman that would be his wife and the mother of his children, and how he would live a life very similar to how he lived his.
As he said, he envisioned his life there in the Two Rivers, having his wife and his children live there too. And I think he clings to that much, much more. Just with the other characters, Perrin, with the loss of his wife, is ready to move on. Matt, hating his parents and hating the dynamic there, albeit leaving his sisters, which he doesn't like, but he's ready to move on. And Egwene, as we saw, wanting to be a wisdom, she's ready to move on. But Rand still has his anchors there in the Two Rivers. He's not ready to go.
He had such a great example of a loving relationship from his parents. And then also we see a lot of the dynamic between him and his father. Obviously, they spend a lot of time together. You're not going to take Bella down the hill with the carriage, often. It's a lot of work. You hear about him and Tam when they're asking about, how did you get the stuff down the mountain before the road was here, and had to carry it but not the brandy, and the interaction between them just feels so warm. You don't want to leave with that, and you want to keep that connection with each other. The fact that he has to leave and is forced to leave is really, really meaningful in a lot of things.
Yeah, I thought that maybe he and Perrin would be the most ready to leave home, but it probably put a wrench in that he'd be leaving with Egwene, because I think he understands that Egwene has moved on from him. Yeah. All of his dreams about how he would live his life in Emond's Field have now kind of gone up in smoke. Maybe he's not ready to think about the future, but Trolloc bursts into the farmhouse. Both of them use their normal implements. They've got a boar spear in there. They've got, belt knife. But then Tam al'Thor gets knocked down under his bed and pulls out this really nice sword, and it has
beautiful box. I love the heron-marked sword. Will become, multiple stories in the future, I'm sure. And having this moment of epicness. You don't need to know history. You don't need to know what's going on to know that there's something special about this. And the presentation of the fight between Tam and the Trolloc, you immediately recognize that Tam knows how to use the sword.
Yeah. And he knows what a Trolloc is.
Yeah. And even Rand looks taken aback once Tam starts fighting.
What is the sheep farmer doing?
Right.
Yeah. And the pain from that Trolloc's blade in his arm when he does start to get beaten. He's felt pain before in a fight. You can tell based on his reaction, and you can see that he's going to do, whatever it takes to get through it. But thank goodness that there was the fire poker there for Rand to come and save the day.
Yes.
Epic.
So both Nynaeve and Rand have killed a Trolloc now.
Perrin, on the other hand, he killed many Trollocs.
He killed many
as well as his wife.
Perrin is married.
And loves his wife. His wife was not part of the women's circle ceremony, which is really interesting. And we don't really get to learn more about their dynamic, like why she didn't be a part of that, why she holds herself back, and even in the celebratory moment is in the smithy working. Layla, Perrin's wife, really did look unhappy, but not necessarily with Perrin. There was this tender moment in bed where she's got her arm around him and is kind of stroking his fingers. She loves her husband, but she holds herself back from the women's circle in the festival. She comes out to dance, but she dances with Perrin.
Yeah, I'm baffled by this. I asked those same questions, like why is she not at the women's circle? Why is she working in the smithy when everybody else is celebrating? And it is Nynaeve that kind of scolds Perrin almost and sends him back. Like, your wife's there working alone. Like, his festivities were cut short because he had to go see what she was doing.
Well, it's a good thing he was there. They were able to have that epic battle, especially for somebody that doesn't really know how to fight. I thought that the choreography in that fight was so well done, because you could tell that, yes, they knew how to use the tools. Like, you could tell that they had swung blacksmith hammers before and were able to manipulate them the way that they needed to be done, but were still not trained fighters. And I thought that was just beautifully choreographed and makes it all the more heartbreaking when the death blow hits.
Well, Perrin seems to have a sort of bloodlust almost come over him after the Trollocs down.
He was like a berserker.
Yeah, he keeps going and going and going and was not able to turn it off.
Yeah.
I think that's so interesting that he's just learned that violence is a thing that can spin out of control. And this is something that's going to haunt him for a long time. And how will it affect his willingness to fight in the future? Knowing that the first big fight that he was in, as far as we know, ended with his wife's death. On the other side, Perrin's relationship with Mat is so nurturing. And I was really touched by the three together, especially Perrin with Mat. He seems to take the lead in saying, you know what, we know you have gambling problems. We know maybe you're a petty thief, but you know what?
And
here's some.
You have not the best home situation.
Yes. But here's some money. Go buy your sisters some lanterns. That's the most important thing. I was really touched to see that.
Yeah, it does a good job of showing that friendship and how they're able to use those bonds of friendship to get through the trials that are going to come.
Even with their personal struggles. And Mat, in my opinion, other than, murdering your spouse in a blood frenzy, I think Mat's life is very, not torturous necessarily, but it's very difficult. We learn about his parents and their difficulties and the nurturing that Mat feels for his sisters, and has to take this parental role, making sure they have food, making sure they have the lanterns for the ritual and the celebration. And it was so interesting to see that explanation of why in the first scene when you meet the three boys, why he's gambling, why he's, as freewheeling as he is, and then turns around and is so caring and supportive of his sisters, and also taking care of his mom.
I mean, that's really, right now at least, that's his one redeeming trait. Mat is a caretaker and a father figure for his two sisters, and he's the buffer where his mom's a drunk, his father is a flirt or a philanderer, and Matt has a gambling problem, and that spurs him to be a petty thief. But Rand and Perrin see this in Matt, and they probably tolerate a lot of his stuff because they do see the goodness in him. I was really struck, though. His mother, in her drunken stupor, looks at Matt and says, he's going to be just like his father, a damn prick. Yeah. Wow. That's gotta hurt.
Yeah, especially with all of the family needs that he has to do, that he has to take care of. And he's not thanked. He's not supported. There's no sort of recognition for the work that he's doing for the family either. And all his mom can say is that he's going to turn out like his dad. Has got to just stab in the gut. That is hurting and deeply, deeply painful, which makes it all the more ready for him to, I'm going to leave. Because especially when he's going to get his sisters taken care of, there are people to check in on them. And so he can turn around and be like, okay, I'm out of here. I'm ready to live myself a little bit.
I don't know if he knows that yet. I think he still feels responsibility, that he's responsible for his sisters. And if he leaves, that's going to be a problem. I think that's going to eat at him.
Oh, 100%, because he's a parent. He's, he is that parent. Even if your kids are off with family or with the babysitter or whatever, you are having a break, but you are giving over that, caregiving tool to someone else. The relief that you feel of getting away is also balanced with the level of grief. And there's something to be said for Matt to learn a little bit more about who he is and what he really wants, as opposed to what's being forced on him because of his personality and family situation and what he feels like he has to do.
I think he has a lot of growing to do. Out of all of them, I think he's the one ready to make leaps and bounds once he's outside the Two Rivers.
Agreed.
She's young, but in a position of authority, a leader, Moiraine called her. She's the village wisdom. She can listen to the wind. What's your take on Nynaeve here in the show?
She's perfect.
Absolutely perfect. I adore her. She was never really my favorite in the books, and yet her level of power and her level of strength of personality and the control over the town was just epic. Standing up to Moiraine in the cave was beautiful. Being in charge of the ritual and the loss of her being dragged away was just heartbreaking.
Definitely.
I think she was the first one. Once it becomes apparent that there's danger and the Trollocs are there, I think she's the first one that reacts, pulling Egwene out of the way and getting her to safety, and pulling this random guy into the shadows where they can try to help him. Everybody else is just running around, but she's already got her focus. She's already thinking like a wisdom, like a leader.
Yeah, and is gonna scream at a Trolloc.
Right.
I love that. The Trolloc roars, she roars right back.
She's fantastic.
So powerful, so strong, and just beautifully done. Beautifully done.
So we've talked about Nynaeve's strength, but she also has some inner trauma or a grudge that she's carrying. The old wisdom came from outside the Two Rivers, brought her. She was an orphan, and she was an apprentice. She could learn how to listen to the wind, and her mentor could listen to the wind too. In fact, the old wisdom tried to go as a youth to the White Tower for training as an Aes Sedai. But, according to Nynaeve, the Aes Sedai turned her away because of her peasant accent and her peasant clothing. She has a grudge against Aes Sedai, and that grudge carries over to Moiraine.
And I wonder how much of that is factual. Once we see more of the White Tower, I'm wondering, are they very selective? Like, is Nynaeve's grudge based on accuracy, or is it just one of those tales that gets, blown up as it gets retold? Because I'm just having a hard time imagining the White Tower turning people away.
At the very least, it is what Nynaeve believes, and that's what she was told. And so, by golly, she is going to be extremely standoffish to Moiraine, and we'll see how that reacts to the future, because, spoiler alert, she's going to return.
Moiraine comes in and questions Nynaeve. In a roundabout way, she tried to determine her age, and she also said that she senses strength in her.
I think Moiraine does mention 5. In that beginning scene with Lan, she says there's 4 Tavern. But I think in this episode later, she says one of the 5 of you. So I think she does mentally tally Nynaeve in that group for a little while, at least.
Yeah.
And I think it is just, as we've said, her standing up to Lan when he comes in. I mean, it takes a lot, in, I think, Moraine's opinion, for someone to counter her warder, who is just so... Imposing, right. Yeah, it's just that strength he offers. And Nynaeve's like, I'm not having none of that.
Yep.
Like, I'm going to stand right up to you. So I think Nynaeve's strength is very apparent.
And the Trolloc that takes her doesn't just spear her or start to eat her. It drags her away, like it was after her.
That's a good point.
And also, part of it, too, I think, is they wanted that Trolloc wanted a snack. He was hungry.
He was going off to eat in private because it's not good to eat in
He
public.
didn't want to share.
Can we talk a little bit about those Trollocs? How'd you like them?
Oh, well, I hated them.
It was amazing.
I loved them.
Yeah, so well done.
So beautifully done. The lighting and dramatic use of shadows with everything just really makes it stand out. So you have, just a tiny little bit of a fade at the beginning coming to visit, shall we say, before the attack. But then when the Trollocs show up, it's such a surprise, that pointy part of the axe poking through chest, and then suddenly the Trollocs are here. Oh my goodness. Absolutely frightening. Exactly what we needed as the big bad.
They're like the physical representation of what the dark is.
Yes.
And they look like it. They look like they're out of nightmares.
Yeah. I loved how they had Trollocs that they differed in how they looked, but also some of them run on all fours, and some are walking on goat feet and things like that. That's just, they were, they were perfect, I thought.
So well done.
All right, so we have our cast of characters. One of them might be the Dragon Reborn, and Moiraine is going to lead all of them out of the 2 rivers, because coming down the mountain are the armies of the Dark One. They kind of took that message pretty quickly, didn't they?
Yeah, they're all so strong in the community. Like, this is their family, even if they're not blood related, that the only way to do what they need to do is to follow the instructions of somebody that has information, that has more information than they do. I'm glad they got to say goodbye. I'm glad they got to have a memory of, hey, this is the town. It's traumatic. I can't, help rebuild it, but we have to go, and let's get on our horses and let's GTFO.
Yeah, I think their sense of community lets them be able to make a choice for the greater good. That even if there's a sliver of truth in what Moiraine is saying, they need to take it. That
visual of the Trollocs coming down the mountain really makes all debate kind of superfluous at that point. So they have to leave now, and they're going to leave now to save the village. And even Tam, Rand's father, kind of nods his approval. We're not going to spend a lot of time agonizing over this. It's done. It's time to leave. The story is underway.
It's not an ending, but it is an ending of the first episode.
Of the first episode.
Before we jump into the book-related conversations, we want to send you over. If you would like to hang out with us and join us, of course, visit Dragonmount.com, all of our social media accounts. And specifically, go to patreon.com/Dragonmount, where you can become a patron of Dragonmount and support both this podcast and the other aspects of the website and community. Also, make sure you check out the Incomparable Network and all of the good things over there. And with that, let's dive into the book thoughts.
This episode condenses the first 10 chapters of The Eye of the World, so there's a lot of stuff to cover, and I think they did it with a lot of efficiency.
Yeah, I thought immediately this episode is immediately engaging. It immediately sets up the goals and the purpose in a way that the books didn't. You know who the main character is in the books because you have like a chapter and a half of getting from the farm to the town, and by having it jump the way that it did and the pacing is so perfect, I knew that they would be condensing things because you're not having to have 6 chapters or like 6 pages of, describing the material that these dresses are made out of. And you get to see it instead of be told it. And there's something just so beautifully done with how much care they've put into these choices. You can see, in that first bit where Moiraine is getting ready to pack and wrapping up a Tarangriel.
Terangriel?
I think it's an Angreal.
Yes.
No, that one was an Angreal.
The fat little man with crossed legs.
Ooh, is that what it was? Was it the one that she gives to Rand?
In the books, Moiraine had a woman, Angreal, a woman in robes, and the little fat man Angreal is, which is a Sangreal, I think, is something Rand found.
That one was an Angreal, but it was one for a man to use.
Yeah, so I am so intrigued to see what that's going to be, if it's going to be maybe useful for either, or if...
Wow, I totally missed that fact. I thought it was Moraine's Angreal, and I was like, why didn't she use
Right.
it when they're battling the Trollocs? And like, well, that's why.
Unless
because
it is
for
going
a man.
to be the one that she's going to use, and it just looks different. Who knows? Like that's a thing that a split second, she's packing. Okay, cool. It makes no difference to the show, to viewers that have not read. And yet, it is a moment for us to go, oh, I wonder what that is.
So many changes, but nothing outlandish. Nothing that was, like, offensive.
Yeah, nothing felt wrong. Mm-hmm. It makes sense that, by aging them up, so it's not teenagers.
Right. That was a great choice.
Such a great choice. And of course, Perrin would have a wife. Why would they not have a relationship? At this age, it makes sense that, Egwene just became an adult at 20. So she's not going to be married. And Rand doesn't get out very much, especially because he was waiting for Egwene to become a woman. So it just makes complete sense that with aging everyone up and having the relationships the way that they are and all of those things, it just makes perfect sense.
Well, Perrin is a catch. Like, I will say it. He's kind and he's thoughtful and he's big and he's burly.
And he's got a real job and...
Exactly. So that's why Matt is still single, I'm sure.
Yes. Well, and especially, the change... Oh, not super happy with the Cawthon adjustments, mainly because I'm just sad for Matt's dad, because Abel is such a great part of the books, but it's valid. It makes sense. Now that I think about it, I'm like, oh, it is kind of strange that all 3 boys and Egwene all had really stable parental figures.
Right.
Perrin had 2 sets with the
Luhans.
Yes, with the Luhans being able to have that parental thing. So yeah, let's add a little bit of tumultuousness.
Yeah.
I
mean,
it
reminds me in the books, how it's almost like the Shire in The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. It's this idyllic, idealized setting from which you have to leave. And leaving is scary and it's painful, but you have to do it. But of course, this is really interesting because we're not just setting this idyllic setting where the characters have to go, perhaps to come back, but we're giving these characters some internal conflicts to resolve over the course of the arc. There is this big Dragon Reborn arc that needs to be settled, but there are also character arcs that are set up right now in this first episode.
And it just makes it a more interesting story.
Definitely.
Yeah, these characters are flawed. They have trauma.
Yep.
Yeah.
All of them. And in the books, like you said, Rajiv, they don't. It's a perfect world for them. And so leaving is a little bit more difficult, I think, in the books. But this makes for better storytelling. Like, they're not perfect. They're flawed. They're damaged.
They're real.
They're real.
They're real.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, we are finishing up our first podcast episode of the first episode of the Wheel of Time show called Leavetaking. And now we are going to take our leave. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kathy.
I'm Rajiv.
And I'm Maureen.